Welcome everyone to our English Weanling Seminar. We've run these for a few years now and we hope you take a few things away from this two-day English Australian Weanling Sale. Is tomorrow obviously and Wednesday, so hopefully some of this is very informative for you and you can put what you learned today into practice either at tomorrow's sale or obviously at the Great Southern Sale in June. We will allow a little time for questions at the end of this, so if something strikes you during the seminar, please note it down, and myself and Will Gardner, my co-host, will bring the microphones around to you. I'll introduce our panel just in a moment, but first we'll hear from Caitlin Smith from AgriFutures, who are supporting these seminars each and every year, to tell us a little bit about AgriFutures, Caitlin, and what they do for the industry.
Thanks, Gemma. I'm Caitlin Smith. I'm the Program Manager at AgriFutures Australia. I look after the Thoroughbred Horses program. So AgriFutures is one of 15 rural research development corporations. And the AgriFutures Thoroughbred program invests levy funding into research for the thoroughbred breeding industry in Australia. So every breeder pays $10 for every mare and stallion cover, and that is then matched by the Commonwealth Government, and we're guided by a strategic plan with a group of people on our advisory panel, industry experts that help us decide in what research needs the industry has. So some of our research projects on the go at the moment are looking into yearling x-rays and their effect on long-term racetrack performance. We're also looking at developing a vaccine for rattles in foals, developing a workforce strategy for the thoroughbred breeding industry, and then also a retired thoroughbred project looking at improving the demand for those horses. And on top of the research and development that we do, we also support workforce and capacity programs. So one of those is the Les Young Scholarship. The Les Young Scholarship is an opportunity for 18 to 30-year-olds in the thoroughbred industry, and it's an opportunity to travel over to the UK and complete a tailored program at the National Stud in Newmarket. And applications are open now, so I wanted to give it a bit of a plug this evening because I think there's probably some suitable people, or you might know of somebody to apply. So applications for that one closes on Tuesday next week. And the other opportunity we have open at the moment is our Thoroughbred Horses Advisory Panel. We're looking for 2 new members of the industry. That could be a breeder, that could be a vet, an industry stakeholder to step onto our advisory panel and help us direct the research so it is relevant for the industry, it's practical and it's outcomes focused. And always would love to hear from anybody that has any ideas or needs in research and development in the industry. Feel free to subscribe to our newsletter and mailing list, keep in touch. And thanks for the opportunity, English. We're really, really happy to sponsor these events and look forward to doing it in the future.
Thanks, Caitlin. And thank you to AgriFutures for supporting these seminars that we can all learn from. Now to introduce the panel, Will Gardner from Inglis will join me as well. He's coming up onto the stage now. First off is Rae-Louise Kelly, a driven horsewoman. We've described you as Rae-Louise, whose racing career has taken her from the north of England to Newmarket, Kentucky, and also Australia. You rose to yearling manager at Widden Stud, and your husband, Podrick, and yourself purchased Fernrig Farm in 2016, and it's quickly become a respected Hunter Valley operation. Despite being relatively young in the established thoroughbred nursery, Fernrig has already had great success, including selling the likes of Group 1 winner Beauty Eternal, highly successful in Hong Kong. We've got the talented 2-year-old Chiquero and Hong Kong Classic Mile winner Excellent Proposal, who is back at the farm now and off to Stonewall in a few weeks. To your left is, or to your right rather, is Libby Bleakley. Libby, a highly respected horsewoman from Martinborough in New Zealand, an hour east of Wellington, whose passion for racing and breeding began at just 11 years old. And after early experiences at Newbury Park, you built your career through racing stables, equine study at Massey University, yearling preparation and hands-on breeding roles. At Sunline Trust, International Management Scholarship winner, took you to leading global farms, including Coolmore, Vinery Stud and Darley. And Libby, you later developed Wellfield Lodge before co-founding Hyden Park in 2010 with your husband Sam. And on your honour roll is the 8-time Group 1 winner Beauty Generation and Group 1 Oaks winner Toffee Tongue. To your right, Doc Lawler, Dr. Chris Lawler, respected veterinarian, and we know you as Doc, very prominent in the Australian equine industry, bloodstock agent and yearling circuit veteran based in the Wollongong area. I'm not sure if you like being described as a veteran. Means you're experienced. Known for sourcing elite racing horses like Tarzino and Gypsy Goddess, you've specialised in advising trainers and owners and conducting private farm tours and managing veterinary assessments of top yearling sales, at the top yearling sales. And finally, Shane McGrath, hailing from Ireland. Shane, you came to Australia in 1997 and you worked for some of our leading farms here, including Coolmore and the Old Eliza Park, before a fruitful stint in management at Aquis during a period in which they enjoyed so much success with gallopers such as Farnan, Mwonga, Anders and Ellsberg and more. You bought basically in your time there and under your watch, Shane. Following Aquis, you moved to the coastal lifestyle of Lennox Head and you forged a great working relationship with Clinton McDonald with recent successes such as Angel Capital, Hayasugi, and this year's Blue Diamond winner and Golden Slipper runner-up Streisand from the English Premier Sale. All right, our first topic tonight is raising a weanling and weanling nutrition. Libby, the first question's for you. Producing a weanling for a sale, it's a long process as we know, and it begins with choosing the mating, gestation, the birth. Firstly, how much time and effort goes into selecting a mating with all that in mind?
Oh, that's one of those crystal ball questions we sort of find with our industry. You constantly have to be looking 2 years ahead, trying to predict spec, always asking questions around you, what nice foals people have seen. When it comes to your mare, identifying weaknesses, be it pedigree, type, physicality, that you may need to try and overcome by sending to the correct stallion. Look, to be completely honest, we have a very small band. We've only got sort of 5 or 6 mares at Hyden Park now, and they're owned by some very sharp breeders who seem to, luckily enough, get it right most times. So I actually learn a lot off them. They don't need my 2 cents at the end of the day. They're very well versed in what they're doing. So, but perhaps others have probably got more experience when it comes to the breeding and production side.
Well, Rae-Louise, you might be able to chime in here as well, but what happens next once you've welcomed the foal into the world? You've done the mating, gestation's gone well, pregnancy's gone well, you've got the foal on the ground. What happens next? What's the next step of the process?
Up until weaning, we probably start weaning, we finish about March, and then we let the foals grow out in their own age groups until around July time, and then you start thinking about what sale each foal's going to be going to and try to paddock them up accordingly so that the nutrition remains the same. I think the nutrition is a massive part of your x-rays, the development. I mean, everybody knows you don't want a weanling coming in to prep and you have to push the feed and stuff into it because your joints go. It's the coat's going to go. It needs to be a very balanced transition. So from July, we'll paddock up the weanlings into the sales that we think they're going to go to and almost start sale prep, but from the paddock, if that makes sense. So get a balanced diet. They'll come in once a month for a few days, just get hand walked, go on the walker. So when they do come into prep, it's not a shock to the system. They're not having to get feed forced into them, and it's a gradual transition into the sale prep and goes a lot smoother throughout. You know, the knees are easier to hold and everything else. So.
And I suppose, Shane, your involvement in thoroughbred nurseries such as Eliza Park and Aquis is well documented. And how much emphasis during that time would you place on going and looking at the young stock, and what would you be looking for at? Are you looking for future matings, selling, racing?
Yeah, I guess It started with the mare, I suppose. You know, predominantly black cats have black kittens. You know, so if you've bought a mare, you've obviously liked the attributes she has, whether it's her physical makeup, you know, the quality she has, how she moves, and then you're trying to breed that out of the mare. Obviously, the stallion will complement that, but you know, one of the anomalies you hear a lot is you're trying to. You know, you've got a mare that has a deficiency that you're trying to complement that with a stallion. But if you're starting off on that basis, it makes it quite difficult, I think. So generally, the better the type of mare you have, you would have thought the better the type of foal. And, you know, even from our Coolmore days, and we did it as well at Aquis, we tried to look at all the young stock on a monthly basis and evaluate where they were going and what they were doing. You've obviously got your farriers and your vets that, you know, their objective is from a confirmation point of view. And I was trying to look at it more from, you know, where they were going to end up. Was it a weanling sale? Was it a yearling sale? Or the horse they were going to take into the racing program? And I found that it predominantly came back to, you know, if you bought the right type of mare to begin with, you're generally getting the right type of stock to take through.
And in terms of just following that on, would that also result in nutrition changes or feed changes, or would you leave that up to, say, the farm or weanling manager?
Yeah, I guess, I mean, here in Australia, a lot of it is dependent on climate as well. And you'd often hear the old timers say that the best reared horses are in times of drought because everything is fed directly from the bucket, so you know exactly what they're getting. But I mean, they're a grazing animal by nature, so you want to, you know, the pasture is there and make as much use of it as you can. And from that side of things, I think that comes down to the horseman as well. You know, it's to the eye, what sort of, you know, fat score I suppose a horse is carrying. And you know, I think in our industry, a lot of different people have a lot of different terminologies, but ultimately you're looking for the same thing. Like, how does it look? Does it look healthy? Is it growing out well? Does it come off the mare? Is it in good shape? And as Rae-Louise said, where is it heading from there? Does it need to push along? You know, and you can group them up accordingly, colts, fillies, and that sort of thing. And I mean, it's no different to cattle or anything else. I mean, it's how they look to the eye is how you're going to feed them. And then anything from a confirmation point of view, I would normally defer to the farrier in the first instance. And that's maybe more a European thing. And then from there, you've got the vets. Because once you got the professional side of things from a vet, I mean, I'm only joking, not the cost of it, but that's an area of expertise that I don't tend to step into too much. If a vet says, you know, we got to do a screw, we're doing a strip or whatever else, well, that's what you're paying them to do, and let the cobblers cobble and sit back and watch them fix them.
Yep. And bouncing back to you, Ray, you mentioned working out at an early age, whether you're going to target a weanling sale or target yearlings and take them through the yearlings. What factors influence those decisions? Are you selling weanlings on timing? Are you selling them to get off the books?
A lot of it.
You don't have to give away your secrets fully, but...
I mean, like obviously Magic Millions requires a very certain type, and these days a bit of pedigree, and also things that might not grow as well, and you know, might look a little bit out of place at Easter, but early days is a nice, neat, with enough height and enough quality at Magic Millions. And yeah, there's horses, obviously cash flow is a thing as well, so you need to get some early money in, and everybody kind of thinks that there's money there early, so let's aim the early sales. But yeah, I think if you've got a nice horse with a nice pedigree that's going to continue to improve and mature, the later sales, given them the time, is always a good thing.
Doc, next one's for you. X-rays, Shane touched on the veterinary side of things, but they're a huge focus, we know, for sellers and buyers alike. But with these young horses, there's going to be so many significant growth spurts from when they're born through to the yearling and the weanling sales. This first part of their life is so important with the bone remodelling. In a prep, we place them under a lot of pressure with the feeding, the walking, and the stress obviously involved in that. What are the risk factors for OCDs? How does feeding, growth rate, genetics, exercise relate to all of those?
Well, Shane nailed it in what he said earlier, in that when we have drought in the country, when horses are being reared, the level of developmental bone disease that we see is very low. When we're having, you know, good springs and lots of flushes, showers of rain every now and then, Where we can't control the sugars in the pastures, we tend to see a higher incidence of developmental bone disease. From the age they are at 5 months through to yearling stage, they're going to more than double their body weight. And it's that rapid growth, and it's the fastest growth period in the horse's life, that we start to see some of these developmental changes. Tends to be more in the faster growing horses that we'll tend to see it. But if we can get a balanced feed into the horse where it's at consistent levels of sugar rather than varying levels of sugar, we see the incidence of developmental bone disease reduce.
Are there any other ways to mitigate those risks of OCDs outside of that pasture control, feed control?
Well, there's a number of other factors that are involved in it, and you start to pull your hair out because it's also down to some genetics. We see particular stallions that will their progeny tend to develop a lot more developmental bone disease, even though their progeny are on the same feed as other stallions and in the same paddock. We'll get a higher incidence in a particular stallion, and that follows through from some mares as well, which no doubt anybody here who's bred before, you'll occasionally get the mare that, oh God, here she is, she's had another foal that's, looks like Swiss cheese. One after the other, and then hopefully it's a self-limiting thing in that those horses sort of don't tend to be very commercial very quickly, and hopefully what we're doing, and I'm sure what we're doing from what we see in the repository, is that we're breeding a better horse as we go along.
Positive, that's positive. Libby, for you, you pinhook and you take them through to the yearling sales. How do the people out there know that their weanling is progressing in the right direction regarding the height and weight? Do you use a nutritionist, and do you test pasture and soil samples?
Well, it's no secret that we raise really good horses in New Zealand, so we certainly use that to our benefit. And I think for us that eliminates a lot of what you here in Australia have to deal with, like what Shane and Doc and Rae-Louise have all just talked about. We tend to sort of grow a better product naturally. We rely a lot less on supplementary feed, additives. Ourselves personally, our farmers got a lot of hills. We use that to develop our horses in a natural way rather than relying on feed, walkers, bulking, those sorts of things. So once we've pinhooked our weanlings, they go through a program where we alternate between the hills and the flat paddocks. Just in time with their bodies, as their bodies need rest, they come up to the flat paddocks around the stables, they rest, recover, put condition on, but before they can get too heavy, we send them back out onto the hills. And it's also nice, they get to be horses out there. We find we can control their growth a lot more, their nutrition intake. We don't use a nutritionist, we use our eye. We've got scales at home, but once again, it's you can't beat your eye, your gut, your judgment when you've seen crop after crop of foals getting raised on your property. And I think you get to learn your property as well. You know which paddocks horses do better in. If you've got a couple of fatties, you know which paddocks to pop them in because, perhaps the nutrition in those paddocks isn't quite so good. If you've sown new pasture, we do a lot of that at our place. That also, produces quite sort of fat and well-doing horses. So how do you know your weanlings are on the right path? It's hard to say because we don't really sort of look over the fence at the neighbours, but once again, is your horse healthy? Is it growing out well? Is it looking to target for a particular sale that you've got in mind? If not, you might need to switch gear and think of a different. We all own horses. We've all got plans A, B, C, D. Sometimes you've got to get to E. Plan A is always great, but if you do need to change tack and, just forge down a different path for your horse, then so be it. We can't get stuck on plan A as being the be-all and end-all.
The final question in this segment is really about the educational process the weanlings go through. Rae-Louise, you've weaned your foal, it's doing well. What steps are you taking to educate it in regards to accepting the bit, learning to stand in a conformational stand that we have to do at the yearling sales as well, the parading here that they have to do on complex? Those are really important processes that shapes their future. What are those steps that you take in that educational process?
We don't over parade practice at home. because I think they get to the sales and they do, you know, a couple of days in, 50, 60 parades in, just crack the shits completely. We would do a lot of hand walking in open paddocks. I think just learning the horse to walk with you, more horsemanship rather than having to drag them up and down. I think if you come to the Weanling Sale, like, fitness is a big thing for the weanlings as well. It's obviously we don't put them on the walker and work them like a yearling would, but just hand walking a lot, and yeah.
Do you put them on a truck? Like, do they go through that process so getting them to places like this is easier? Is that part of their early life? They're taking up a ramp. Some farms I know do that. Do you do that?
They would go on a cover with the mare. So most of them have been on a truck before, and moving them from the mare farm to the yearling farm. But we also kind of travel them in pairs or threes. That's something we do. Just tie them up a hay net, open up the truck. They're happy.
Sounds easy. Moving into the next topic.
We can all do it.
Pardon?
We could all do it.
Yeah.
Topic 2, moving on to limb deformities. This is where you might take over, Doc. The first question, Doc, angular limb deformities, or bent legs, as most would say, in foals and weanlings has been a topic of great discussion over the years. Can you talk us through some of the perinatal factors that can affect this while going through gestation, and postnatals as well, and how we can manage the mares and also the new foals?
Well, once again, we're talking about a multifactorial thing, but one of the things is the obvious placement of the fetus within the uterus itself. Is it up against the pelvic wall? Is it against the abdominal wall? Position of the horse, just as we would have in humans as well. A lot of it's also got to do with the genetics that we see. We'll see particular families, and I don't know if too many people here remember the 8 to 12 family. Very, very good horses, very fast horses. But all of them were very pigeon-toed in front, and that was just something in the family. It didn't stop them running, but that was characteristic of the family. So if you would go and see, I remember Stella Cadonte, who was a multiple Group 1 winner as a young horse. She was quite pigeon-toed when she went to a sale. I don't even know that she sold and that she was that way, but she ended up with John Morris's and it never worried her, and she sort of raced on. There was a lot of research done by, esteemed gentleman, Wayne McElraith, a New Zealand veterinarian in America, and he's sort of been a bit of a pioneer surgeon on leading light for many years. And he looked at the numbers of horses that had had corrective surgery as youngsters prior to going to a yearling sale versus those horses that had the same sort of limb deformities that weren't operated on, that were just given time and allowed to grow out. And interestingly enough, what he found was that of the two groups, they all had similar racetrack performance. Same average number of starts, same average prize money per start, same stakes level of performance. So really what we're doing here, some of this I feel is maybe we don't have enough patience, and maybe that's driven by our 2-year-old racing, but also market preferences. It's very hard to bring something to the sale that has got an annular limb deformity and say to people, listen, if you wait long enough and you're patient enough, this, just as we saw with I Wish I Win, if we're patient enough, this is going to straighten up and the horse will be fine and it'll tolerate training. They would rather go and buy the product that, well, I can see this is tracking nice and straight here at the moment. A lot easier to sell.
And Shane, you mentioned earlier that in Ireland they rarely use screws. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's in my experience and just chatting about it there. But, in Australia we're growing a much early maturing. The market wants a fast growing horse, and that's driven by the 2-year-old racing here. So you find that horses put on weight a lot quicker, there's a lot more muscle on them, and there's a lot more pressure, and there's a lot more early deformity. So I suppose it's all a condition of your environment.
Is corrective farrier work enough here in this case? Can you, or is it too? Do you intrude too much with surgery? Can that happen?
Oh, I guess I think everybody has their place. I think the hardest thing I found was knowing when to look for intervention. I mean, you're looking at, when you're walking around looking at young stock every day, you have experience will tell you something's wrong. Is it a vet job or is it a farrier job? Because most foals at some stage in their career they're going to need something outside of routine work, and that's where it's so important to have a vet that can work with you and a farrier that can work with you, because the vets can be criticised as everyone can be criticised, but at the end of the day the vet wants what's best for the horse as well, and they're not going to be wanting to go in and do a surgery when it's not necessary. So the vet and the farrier working hand in hand. It's all so important in the horse's early development.
I think as well, just to add to that, like you can manage a foal to a degree with the farrier, but you're putting in a couple of hundred every fortnight with the shoes, the extensions, and it's going to get to a point where the foal kind of goes boom, and the farrier's like, probably should have put screws in it. So saving that few hundred every 2 or 3 weeks on shoes, just put the screws in, manage, like our vet will look at them every fortnight with the farrier, and yes, it's going to be a couple of grand, but in the long run, you've saved on all the wear and tear on the hoof. You're saving the hoof wall, and when you come to a weanling sale especially, you have a better product to work with.
And the New Zealand perspective on that is, we sort of don't really do surgery either, but perhaps that is, our conditions, the horses that we have, we're not producing these big, fast, early, strong 2-year-olds. We rely a lot on farrier, vet, hoof extensions. We also lock up quite early, mares and foals. If the foal looks a little wonky, we'll give it a wee rasp and we'll lock them up, in a mare and foal box, and be it for a week, 4 days, whatever the foal might need to come right. We've sort of had huge success. We had a stallion in our local area when we first started, Hyden Park. Every foal was really bad in front. That taught us a lot really quickly on how to manage front limbs and deformities, and we've had huge success just from really careful management early on, hoof extensions and patience. But then I guess we can get away with that where we are.
And just on that, it's like it all depends on where you are too, doesn't it? I mean, in the middle of September, it's a hell of a lot easier to go and lock up a foal than say we're going to lock up one in November and it's 40 degrees and you've got all the other problems as well. So it's all very much case by case. But the vets they're one or two, and they're seeing the foals as they come through the crush anyway, and that's as good a time as any to ask your vet if there's something that you need to have a think about.
Confinement, Doc, that's something that is recommended in a few cases. When does that come into play? What are the common faults that can naturally improve with those type of practices?
You brought up a good topic actually about confinement, because if I could tell people that's one message to take home from here, is the greatest number of dramas we see following a weanling sale is people who have purchased a weanling, taken it home, and put it straight out in the paddock with all the other horses. They've run around, the next minute they blow up in a stifle, and they've developed a lesion very quickly and fragmented that lesion, requires surgery. Sometimes that surgery leaves a defect that's going to make them distasteful to the market. They'll fall into a moderate risk category. That horse becomes very hard to sell. If there's one thing that I would urge people to do, is that when they buy a horse here, take it home and with a mate, or find a mate for it, put it in a 20 by 20 yard for a period of time. Have a look at your x-ray reports. If there's any hints of any OCDs there, you may wish to medicate the horse weekly, keep it in the yard for 3 or 4 weeks, and then when you're going to release it to the paddock, just a little bit of sedative to take the edge off so it doesn't get out there and just fire like a bullet out of a cannon. But yeah, if that's the one thing that you'd take home, don't put these horses straight in the paddock. Some people do and get away with it, but as I say, the incidence of horses that we see coming for surgery following weanling sales, nearly invariably they've been put straight out in the paddock with other paddock mates, belted around, and all of a sudden made what potentially was going to be a stable and a resolving developmental lesion all of a sudden become an unstable one.
That's great. Shane, talking about buying and taking weanlings home, when you're looking out there, any confirmation faults you feel you can forgive, give a chance to take, buy as a weanling and take through to a yearling sale? And I suppose, are there any faults that you can't forgive in weanlings? And I'd extend this to anyone on the panel.
Yeah, it very much depends on what the plan is at the end game, I suppose. Most of the horses that I buy these days, I'm looking at them that in some shape or form I'm participating in the ownership myself. So if it's a weanling through to a pinhook or a yearling through to the races or part of our Hong Kong business and that sort of thing. And I was in Europe recently, and I spent a bit of time with Gay O'Callaghan, he'd be one of the biggest pinhookers in the world, and they breed a lot of foals every year. And Gay was saying it's getting harder and harder for them to sell yearlings, and they said the reason was that they'd found that a lot of people are so busy now that they're using people to go around and sort of shortlist and everything else. And he said, if you have a horse that is the bullseye, you're getting more money than ever, because it does everything 100%, but people are maybe not experienced, they're just not confident enough to forgive a fault. So we can all pick out the perfect horse, but it's what can you forgive and what can you allow. And I suppose from my point of view, I would always look at a horse, and I'm more interested how it is going past me, because you look at it in front the day you buy it, and after that, from a trainer's perspective, you never watch them like galloping up the straight. They're watching them go past and what the action is like and what the movement is like. And if you're trying to buy a horse to be a racehorse, that's what I'm looking for. Colts, if we're looking at the Hong Kong market, and that's always our backfall, I guess. And I think it's more and more everybody's these days with how strong that market is for us. I mean, they've obviously got to have all the veterinary attributes, but they've got to have a bit of size and scope. And the main reason for that is they've got to carry a bit more weight in Hong Kong. And the way they're racing there, they're fast out of the gates, so they've got to be able to hold a position. And rightly or wrongly, I suppose natural logic would say that a big horse will hold his position a bit easier than a smaller horse. So I would lean towards sort of bigger, scopier sort of weanling, because I know where I'm going to have to place that horse. If it isn't a yearling sale, it's into a ready-run market or a 2-year-old trial and trade. From a confirmation perspective, I think I'm a little more forgiving, because the majority of the horses that I have, once they've had a saddle on them, they're going through Clinton's system in Cranbourne. And I think that's such a wonderful training environment there. They've got so many different surfaces. And we rarely see horses have veterinary issues when it comes to, plenty of them are slow, but you can't factor that in when you're buying them. But from a confirmation perspective, unless it's something really detrimental, I'm happy to sort of forgive them. And then fillies, again, it goes back to the cats and the kittens. I'm looking for fillies. If I end up having to sell that as a breeding prospect, how does it look like? Can I imagine that filly producing, beautiful babies? And I remember Demi O'Byrne told me about 20 years ago when he was looking at a colt, and he said, can you imagine that horse walking around in the golden slipper? And I mean, that's what you're trying to buy. You're trying to buy a horse that's going to end up in a big race, be it a Blue Diamond, a golden slipper, a Derby if it's a staying horse. So you're trying to, if you can't see him running in that, or you can't see it beating the 10 horses that you looked at beforehand, well, it's probably better to leave it there and get on to the next one.
But what can't you forgive? When you can see it walking around the slipper mounting yard, what are the ones that you think you couldn't see? Like, what are those attributes, if you want to share them?
The things that I'm more forgiving in front than behind. I like to have good width through their hocks, and I think they've got to have a power and elasticity through their hind action. As long as they're relatively correct in front, I'm happy enough if it's buying it from a racing proposition, because in my opinion the power comes from behind. So you got to be able to move, and they got to be able to walk. And I'm a big thing on temperament. I would put temperament in just as much as confirmation, because if it's a horse that I like, by the time I get to sending the numbers through to the vet, I'm probably asking him for a reason to tell me why I can't buy it, not why I can buy it. because, you know, I'm backing myself in to pick the physical and the vets to pick the confirmation. But I will always, when I'm getting my yearling inspections, and I'll always ask the vet to do a physical as well from a cold. Obviously, we're checking their testicles, eyes, heart, all that sort of thing. I don't really worry too much if a horse is a little bit toed in. I don't like horses that are offset in both legs, and I hate a hind leg that's a long way out behind. And the other thing I've learned more and more is that if I'm looking at it as a weanling and I'm thinking, it might, invariably it isn't. You know, and I'll write notes like it's got enough size, it's got enough strength, it's got enough scope. That actually means it doesn't. Because I'm trying to tell myself that, you know what I mean? It's either good or it's not. And I've found that I've tried to simplify my own notes and my own way of looking at things these days. Do I like it? Does it move well enough? Is there anything there that's going to preclude me from buying the horse? And if I've got to that stage, then it's on to the vetting. And it's really a case of tell me why I can't buy it. And from even with that, if it's a horse that's going to the racing stable, we vet them a lot differently than we'll vet a horse that might be for our trade side of things. And obviously, you know, the scope is the big thing now. Where is that going to rank? And like it's a bugbear because it's a natural thing. But you obviously can't scope weanlings, or I don't think there's any benefit in doing them. But like you think of the risk you take, and sure, I know you can insure against it, you know, failing the scope. But you turn up here with a grade 3 scope, it hasn't failed, but no one's bought it, so it might as well have failed.
Doc, we all know the famous photo of I Wish I Win, and you touched on it before. Does anyone, and I asked you before, obviously, any success stories with managed foals that have produced good sales, ring results, or even great results on the racetrack?
You're asking the wrong guy, because I work on racetracks and not at studs. So by the time I'm seeing them, you know, all of that process has already been done. Management of them, you know, whether it's involved just farrier work, or, you know, whether there's been invasive work from veterinarians as well, or whether it's just been the patients going. Probably asking the wrong guy.
I was going to say, have you ever said no and it's gone on to become a good racehorse? You know, throw yourself under a bus. Is there anything you think of?
You were asking earlier too about, are there any conformational things? Well, there's certainly things that we'll look at, or you get asked to look at as a veterinarian with horses. One of the most common things, and it's probably one of the most common things that we see, are horses that are offset in front. And this is more so to do with yearling sales. And you were talking about veterinarians getting a chance to see foals at the crush when they bring the mare up. And so oftentimes you'll see the mare come up and it's offset and it's off 4. And then you look at the foal and it's offset and it's off 4, and it's gone from one to the other. But it's not something that greatly affects them all that much. And I prefer to see a horse, if it's offset, that's actually already growing a splint on the inside of its cannon. That's the one thing, because the inside splint bone's carrying or bearing more weight when the horse is going at increased pace, that we'll start to see a response and the development of a splint. And if that's happening in the weeks leading up to a golden slipper and the horse goes lame because it's growing the splint, you're thinking, oh my heavens, you know, I wish this didn't happen. They'll all be fine in the long term, but if I'm seeing a horse that's obviously offset and it has already grown splints, I'm not concerned at all. The other, and this is, there's no anatomy, there's no veterinary science at it at all, but, you know, I worked for 26 years on a race course and went and watched race starts and horses parade and whatever. And I'm still yet to see a good horse that's been cow-hocked, where its hind legs are pointing outwards and the points of its hocks are very close together, even though on the ground its feet may be, its hind hooves may be well apart, that we actually see them band in to come in and nearly join behind.
So you're yet to see a good horse like that?
Yet to see a good horse, yeah. You love to try and find, you know, the outlier. And it's good for you guys if you're selling too. You know, it's always nice to have, well, what about Red Zell in his hocks, you know, and we can always pull out the exception, and it's good to know, and it's good for the industry, in that it gives everyone hope. you know, with whatever horse that we're dealing with. When you still can't find a good horse that you know of, having looked at them for so many years, yeah, it's one thing as far as a conformational fault. If I happen to see a horse, and you don't see too many of them, but if I see one that's cowhock now, I don't want to be involved. I generally keep that to myself because, like the rest of the world, I like having a share in a racehorse, and the only cure is death, isn't it? To get rid of that affliction. So, but you know, if I'm, you know, someone who I works for, and you know some of the people who are going in, you think, well, this might be a bit of fun, and they're good people that you're racing with. You know, I'll put my hand up if I like the horse, but if it's a cow-hocked horse and they bought it, I'm just, good luck, fellas.
I'll tell you another one, when you talk about it, very rarely you see a good horse with a bad eye. Yeah, a little small eye, and you look at it, and it's something I look for in cold slot as well. They got a nice big kind eye, and it's most of the good horses I've been associated with have had that as well. But the hock seems to be something. When you're standing there as a consigner, like, trainers are so focused. If close to the hock, you know, it's very hard. And weanlings, you get away with it because they will strengthen a little bit, but if they're really close, they're going to be tough work.
Libby, did you have one?
Yeah, one of our Hong Kong Derby winners was like the photo up there, but on both front legs. He was by the stallion that used to throw a lot of it. But he came right and ended up being a really good horse. So, having faith, but yeah, as you say, statistics come down to it. And when you've seen enough horses, enough good horses, you know which attributes you can accept and which just, won't get you past the winning post.
We're on to our final topic, purchasing a weanling for racing and pin hooking. Shane, sorry, back to you. You've purchased for various trainers and yourself, as we touched on also earlier, but once the catalogues are printed, obviously they go online too and they land on your doorstep. What are the first steps you take to get a shortlist together? And do you have different shortlists for the pin hookers and the end user prospects? I assume you do.
I try and get to look at as many as I can, and to be honest, in a roundabout way, I learned that through Sugi, to be honest, because she wouldn't ordinarily be a filly with the pedigree that would have profiled for a lot of people. We were just fortunate that when I was at Aquis, we'd brought in Royal Meeting, and a partner of mine, Alex, had said he wouldn't mind a filly for his wife, and we went around and looked at everything. I thought, well, these might be affordable. She obviously wasn't one that suited the pin hookers. So it did tell me, going forward, the more horses you look at, the more likely you are to find a diamond in the rough or find a gem. I was actually partner here. We were here last year and we were hunting around, and we saw one that didn't suit everybody else. We're going to take him to the weanling, the ready to run sale. I was just saying to Rae-Louise, I think we're going to get a really good result out of him, purely because we'd sort of both happened to get around and look at it. Again, it was a horse that I wouldn't have ordinarily looked at. Trainers, I think it's a lot easier to do lists for trainers at yearling time, because their clients to get away an extra 6-9 months. So when I'm looking at, I try and stick to proven sires where I can, which is not great for any vendor that's selling a first season horse, because I think there's better value amongst the proven horses. And I remember we were joking about that with Choisir years ago. Like when you got to the 2-year-old races, when they jumped out of the barriers and you had a Choisir in one and you had 4 first season sires inside them, you'd be back in the Choisir to beat them every time, or a Belle Esprit or something, because you knew what you were getting. So again, if I'm pin hooking there to end up with a racehorse, I'm happy to stick to proven sires. I'm a gambler by nature, but I'm cautious in the young sire market, because I know as nice as the first season sires are here, obviously the breeders and the vendors, they've got better stock at home. So, where am I going to land when I've bought one of those when I come into the sales? Am I going to be in the top 30-40%? Well, I've got to be pretty good that I believe I'm buying that one that's better than what he's selling. And then I counter that with, which vendor is it? Is this someone that sells all his foals as weanlings? Or someone that's doing it a bit tough and needs to get a bit of cash flow? So you kind of put a bit of thought into it as well. But the nuts and bolts of it are, the more horses you look at, the more likely you are to find something you're looking for.
Rae-Louise, your processes, you're here. I know you've been looking at everything, or as much as you can, to pinhook. What are your processes putting a shortlist together?
pretty similar to Shane, try and look at every foal on the complex. There's obviously a few obvious stallions as a pinhooker you know you're going to struggle selling the next year. So, but try to keep a broad list. We usually try and pinhook at both ends of the scale and try and get the staff involved. And I think if you put in the long yards and try and look at everything, there is normally something there that physically is very good, might not necessarily make, top tier yearling sale, but will stand out in a lesser sale, and people might just miss because it doesn't have the sexy pedigree or whatever. But yeah, I try to look at everything and find some, yeah.
And Libby, in a hot market, how do you find value but also mitigate your risk? And I can imagine it can't be easy.
Yeah, I think we're probably all struggling on the value aspect at the moment. We've sort of noticed over particularly the last 5 years, the weanling market is just as hot and strong as a yearling market. I think back, sort of 8 years ago, and we'd walk around a complex and there would only be pinhookers there. Your competition was quite small. But now I'll line up for a parade and I'm standing next to a trainer and I think, well, hang on, I want to buy this for you to come and buy. Why are you here? So it's getting quite difficult to find value. I think we all sort of do the same job, but we all have different strengths. And I think it's really important that you know your strengths as a producer. Be it you've got a gun farrier and you can correct a conformation issue that others can't. Perhaps you grow out a good horse. You can, get it, maybe it's a bit underdone, a little bit backward now, but you know that once you take it home, you can grow it out into a beast of a product to come back through yearling sales. So, yeah, knowing your strengths and where you can, add your value to a product is really important. Having a good relationship with your vet. We all sometimes cop a bit of a hiding when we get horses vetted and x-rays looked at. We've got a really good relationship with ours in the sense that he knows how we grow product. So what could be seen as faults to someone else, he gives us the confidence to say, you guys will have no problem, the way you manage horses, have a go. So we find that that's really, really important. We also sort of stay away from fashion. I think if you were to look through our pinhook results, maybe our 2 worst results ever have been because we fell into the fashion trap. As Shane was saying, we've done really well with stallions that are deemed to be bread and butter. The likes of Starcraft, Choisier, Magnus, horses like that you just know can produce you a good racehorse. And just about every trainer's had a good one in the barn. And trainers tend to be creatures of habit. If they've done well with a family, with a stallion, they come back for more. And it can be quite a simple formula to work out. We've done a lot of observing, watching of what buyers like, what they buy at yearling sales. Just one, for example, we had a good bit of success pinhooking last year because we'd followed a trainer the whole way through and we sort of noticed all his good horses were small chestnut fillies with a bit of white on the face. He's got a very, very good one in New Zealand as we speak. So we went to the Weanling Sales and we bought a small chestnut filly with a bit of white on her face, and lo and behold, who rocked up at Yearling Sales and bought her? That trainer in question. Also, canvass your marketplace. I spent probably a good 3 or 4 years going up to trainers that I respected and thought, gosh, I'd love to have a horse in your stable. And I would ask them what I could bring to the yearling sales that they would want to buy. And if they said they wanted a red car with blue square wheels, I trawled the weanling sales to find what they're after. So having someone in mind when you're buying a weanling, we've found to be really beneficial. And then when they come round at yearling time, I can say, now remember you told me you wanted XYZ, well, this is what I bought, what do you think? They may buy it, they may not, but once again, it's educating yourself on what the market wants. There's no point blind buying a product and hoping someone's going to be waiting at the other end and loves it as much as you do. So just observing, doing lots of research. We've done very well with, a more classic horse, Derbies, Oaks. So we actually sat for probably a good 4 years and watched sprinting results and watching, you know, markets and what they look like as weanlings, yearlings, who bought them. We did a lot of homework and research before we went out and started pinhooking sprinters. I was happy to say we were no good at it. We just had no experience in it, and it wasn't our natural type that we gravitated towards. We found them a bit choppy and a bit small, but now, after putting in the years of research, you know, we would happily sort of go towards pinhooking a sprinter. And
it's funny you mentioned research. There was a great line that came in after the Easter sale with you, Shane, sitting down with our bloodstock analyst, Mitch Bates, talking about extreme choice fillies and how you researched the videos of the good extreme choice yearlings through to their racing. Do you do the same with weanlings as well?
I owe you 100 for that. What were we talking about? No, I'm only joking. No, I'll tell you something that just came to mind as well, just listening to Libby, is from a pinhooking point of view, and something I've done a lot more, is getting a good rapport with someone within the sales company, whichever sales company it is, because those people, they've been around, they've seen the stock that you're looking at a lot more than you have. They know the farm, they know what's going on with the family, they can tell you where it's going to slot into the catalogue, what letter of the alphabet, what sale it's likely to go into. And like, at the end of the day, I suppose they're valuers as well, and there's no harm to say, well, where do you see this price range? You know, I always had the sort of feeling that the sales company is working for the vendor, but it's, you know, it's incumbent on them to assist the buyer as well. And I've found that in the last 10 years, more and more, you still back your own judgment and you rely on your own information, but the more information you have that you can put into that collective melting pot, the better I've found. And yeah, just with what you're talking about with extreme choice, we said we wanted to come and buy what we perceived was the best filly at Easter, and we were looking at all these extreme choices, and I think it's well known, people say, oh, they're all shapes and sizes, they just run, or 1 in 4 is a stakes winner. We said, yeah, but there's got to be a bit more to it than that. We did ask a couple of people, and it was a common factor that you had to look in. And as I said, we spent a couple of hours. We just looked at every online video that was available of yearlings by Extreme Choice that had gone through the sales, just to see what we saw was the common denominator. And you know, I'd love to say we paid what did we pay? 1.4. Like, it wasn't 140,000, so we weren't like geniuses that we found her, but it just gave us a bit more confidence when we went and bought her, to be honest.
We'll go back to, because Rae-Louise, you did mention the staff horses that you've been very passionate about doing over the last few years. This was a very successful story. We did a story on this year as well. Can you tell us a bit of the background? The Noconi Final Star, as you'll see on the screen, purchased for $8,000 on Inglis Digital with the staff. Sold at Classic for $200,000, and it is something that's so important, is to get that next generation, the staff that are on the farm, invested in the industry, not just as workers, but, you know, involved in this pinhooking game.
It's really important, I think, that everybody knows that you can get involved at the bottom end and still be successful. You don't have to be buying weanlings for, you know, 100 plus to get in there. This colt I seen online. I loved the shape of him. He was from a farm that I knew there was plenty improvement. He'd had a bit of a backwards start. He had a beautiful hind quarter. I think in the pictures, especially, his hock was probably just a little bit out behind and a bit weak, which would have put a lot of people off. But he did have a really good action. Again, by a stallion that we've kind of said all night, bread and butter, Noconi. I mean, when he stood in the Hunter Valley, everybody would send him 2 or 3 mares because you knew you were going to get a solid racehorse. Yeah, he had good leg. Good. Loved him. I haven't seen any of them here this sale. Yeah.
And getting the staff involved is obviously very rewarding, and getting new participants into pinhooking and owning horses, and you obviously enjoy that.
Yeah, I love doing it. We've been flat out today, but I do have a list for my staff to come around and have a look at a couple. So if you guys see them, that's what they're doing. And they have a budget. It's not an endless money pit. So yeah, no, it's
open checkbook.
Yeah, I know. And I think it's really good for them to learn. I'll give them a few of my notes, and just so they can compare and see if they can see what I'm saying, and also I love to get their feedback as well. So a few of the girls on the farm especially have really stepped up in the last year and get more confident with giving you opinions, and I think it's really good for them people in particular when they're doing the feed run and things, that you can trust that they can come back and, you know, give you feedback on the weight, the condition, the limbs, the conformation. It's really valuable as a farm owner to have them staff especially.
And it obviously doesn't go all right. I think about my first pinhooking experience while working on Eureka. We bought a foal online, and 3 months into her living at Eureka, I went down to give her a feed and she had a blue spot on an eye. So she was in to the clinic, came back, had her sold as a yearling at the Weanling Sale, and she failed to scope. And then did a tendon as a racehorse for us. So obviously a great story, and it always doesn't happen, but you can learn so much through the process. So
Thanks
that's great.
for that inspirational story.
Well, I think he raises a good
reality.
point. Yeah, is that, you know, there are bleeding noses amongst it all, but sometimes you've just got to hang on for dear life and just go again, and you get there eventually, and there's massive highs and massive lows, as with every aspect of what we do. Pinhooking can be really heartbreaking at times, but yeah, hang on for dear life, go again, and the good times do come.
X-rays of weanlings. What can improve from management? Does your attitude change, Doc, depending on whether a weanling is being bought for racing or trading? Here are some diagrams for people to consider while we have this conversation.
Well, it's most of the radiographs that we're seeing at the moment, there's very, very little evidence of any developmental bone disease, because these horses, a lot of them 42 days ago were radiographed. We'll see a lot of changes occur in the next 5 or 6 months, and that's why I always stress to people, don't rely on the weanling sales radiographs. Always take your surveys, whether it's at the end of July, early August, early September. They're the ones that give a good evaluation as to what's going on with the horse. It's very, very rare that we'll get a developmental bone disease problem beyond 12 months of age. You get the occasional one, but they're very much an outlier. But so much changes in this. You know, if you're pinhooking and you're wanting to go through to a yearling sale here, it's nice to start with a clean sheet. It's not going to say that it will stay clean, but it's nice to start with a clean sheet. And if you're prepared to take a bit of a chance on one that might have a non-fragmented OCD, and you say, well, listen, I'm going to take this home, lock it up, treat the horse, manage it properly. If I have to go and have surgery done, it's not going to be the end of the world. I won't be left with a defect that's going to have it rejected by the marketplace. So there are some people that are doing that. I've got some visitors here. There are some people that are doing that, but most of us that are pinhooking, certainly the people that are here as end users, the trainers, are far more forgiving of any sorts of signs of developmental bone disease.
Shane, when looking at weanlings and valuing them as they sit in front of you, you're working back from what you think you can sell them as yearlings for, and then valuing the weanlings there, or do you value them as you go, and how hard do you stick to those values?
It's very much a moving target, isn't it? When you're trying to evaluate, I suppose if you're pinhooking into a yearling market, you've got to work out what sale it's going to, where it's going to sit. And obviously your risk versus reward, really. That's what a lot of it comes down to. And it's getting harder and harder to, the jackpots, the 10 grand weanling that turns into 300 or 4, like it happens very rarely. So they're not the ones that I think you need to rely on. As Libby was saying, you really want to have a fair idea what your market is. And, the buyers gravitate to places where they've had success with before. So, like you're saying, you're trying to identify the horse that's going to suit someone that's already been lucky with you. From our perspective with the colts, are they going to the yearling sales, are they going to ready run sale, or are they going to a trial stage? And then I got to work out what the costs are for those. And sometimes those horses are not going through a yearling sale. You might buy them for a little less because they're not quite as fashionable, but you got a bit more cost on the way through because you got to break them in, you got to take them through to either ready to run or trial stage. And it's a tricky one because you go in, if there's a weanling you really love and you have a figure in your head and you end up buying it, what was wrong there that no one else liked it as much as me, And then when you think maybe you've paid too much for it or whatever. So it's all very much, I suppose you've got to back your own judgment, your own experience, I suppose. But the reality is the safety in numbers too. If you've got a decent spread, but then you got to have the budget and you got to have a good finance manager. If Andrew Muntz is here, you're doing a great job and we appreciate him.
He always gets a shout out, Andrew Muntz. You've all touched on this, and Shane, you just have again, but the importance of relationships, whether it's with the bloodstock company, whether it's with your vet, whether it's with your farrier, whether it's with the farms you're buying off, how important are those? Because it's not just the pin hooking aspect. You've got a great relationship with John Kelly and that you've sent your horses to. You also have a great relationship, obviously, with Clinton and other trainers. How important are they? Because it's not, as I said about the pin hooking, it's that long-term prospect. It's about what they do on the racetrack. It's about who you choose to mould them the right way for that success. And then hopefully send them back through a chairman's sale if they've had that elite success as a filly. How important are those relationships and who's
they're everything. Like at the end of the day, we're all individuals. Not everyone likes me. I don't like everybody, and that's just the way life is. And you got to find people that you can work with, and people that you can bounce things off as well. And like I was saying, whether it's using someone from the sales, or there's definitely a comfort in looking at horses or looking at your shortlist with someone that's happy to give you a genuine opinion rather than tell you what you want to hear. And then when you're getting down the track, if you're ending up as Doc was saying, if you're putting the colours on, you got to love them. So you want to make sure you're in bed with the right people.
Doc, we sat up here a couple of years ago and spoke to Angus Atkins about scoping weanlings, and his opinion was that he does not think it's right, and then obviously scopes can change. Do you have an opinion on scoping weanlings?
I'll tell you what I do have. I've got a bloody good story about that. Ian Duckworth, who a lot of you will know, he's one of the proprietors of Fairview Park, fantastic veterinarian. At the Old English Sales Complex, probably the biggest buyer of yearlings in Australia, came to us and wanted us to have a weanling scoped. And we thought, this is highly unusual, but no, he said, I'm insisting, I need it done. So Ian had his video scope there, and we went down into the old stable block 3, put a little twitch on the horse. He was a very compliant colt. Put the scope in there. Have you got the video on? Turn the video on. People are not going to believe this. The thing was a grade 4. It couldn't expand its throat on the left-hand side. Anyway, we both looked at each other a little bit dumbfounded and sort of thought, well, what the hell does this mean? Is this going to change? Is this like, is it going to be a roar as a yearling, or what are we going to see? Anyway, we reported back to the buyer, who said, see, that's why I did it. I wanted to know this. That horse went through the yearling sale 9 months later, was a grade 1 at the sales, and went on to be stakes placed and win 6 races in the metropolitan area, and had a very long career. I got a sample size of 1, but, so it's no great scientific experiment. But it said to me, I don't want to be making a judgment on a weanling's throat, trying to assess how it's going to behave as a 2 or a 3-year-old when it's racing.
I can add to that. Just on the farm, we bring the weanlings in and out for, they'll come in for the farrier, staying in for a few days, and the girls will bring certain foals to our attention, it was making a really bad noise, or it had its head down trying to eat its hay and sounded terrible, and our vet would just randomly scope 1 or 2 to double check, and the throats are absolutely fine. It's just development, maturity, and you just got to give them time to mature.
I think that goes even when you have a horse that's got a problem. Vets will invariably tell you, let it go as long as it can, because the worse it is, the easier it is to operate on, isn't it?
Buyers on a small budget, I'm sure there's plenty of people here that are keen to get involved if they haven't already, pinhooking, and they just want to get in small to start with. What are the features to finish this seminar with? What features of a weanling should there be focusing on to purchase, whether it's here or at the Great Southern Sale? Can everyone give me something? A standout for a small budget? What features of a weanling should people be focusing on? If you've got a small budget, but you're limited, but you're keen to get involved, what are the standout features that you would tick off?
Good action would be my number one. Buy what you think looks like a fast racehorse, a good racehorse. Don't buy what you think is you're going to turn 5, 10, 15,000 into 200. Don't pinhook for the money, pinhook for what you think is going to win the most races, get your reputation out there. Fast racehorses generally sell well. Anyone want to add to that, or is that pretty much?
Yeah, I guess, it's a risky game, isn't it? We're all gamblers. You don't want to be the one sitting at the top if the house of cards fall over, but you can't fight without soldiers, so just back your own judgment. And, Barry Griffiths was himself and Ian McPherson. Remember they used to buy all those wonderful fillies, and he had a theory, every stallion can get a good horse, but he said there had to be a good filly somewhere in the first couple of dams to give himself a chance, because he said if he was pinhooking and he ended up having to race it, at least he wanted to know that there was some hope going forward. And if the wheels do come off, you got to be left with a product that you can race, and that's the absolute worst result. So have a good trainer, have a good friend, have plenty of friends that want to race with you.
And I think don't be scared to go and ask people to get involved. If you're just starting off pinhooking, don't put all your eggs in one basket. There's a lot of good judges out there, and a lot of people open to, selling 5, 10, 20% of a foal. So don't be scared to approach somebody and talk to them and try and get involved that way.
Start small. Libby?
Also asking advice. You wouldn't find a single person on the complex here today or anywhere that wouldn't happily help. If you're not sure, if you wanted a second opinion, just people are always so happy to give advice, good, bad, ugly, otherwise. It's up to you if you take it or not, of course, but if you've got people that you respect, that you follow, and they've had a bit of success, then just bowl up and put your big boy or girl panties on and ask for some help.
Have a good vet as well, would be the last piece of the puzzle. Thank you everyone for listening to our seminar. We have time for questions. Please put your hand up and I can bring the microphone around, and so can Willie G.
Well, my question's more towards Shane and Doc, because Shane, you buy horses as an end user too, and Doc, you've seen so many horses on the track in so many years. Where does size stop you buying a horse? At what level is it really too small, Shane, as an end user, if you don't have the commercial pressure of reselling it? And Doc, in all your experiences of seeing so many horses on the track, is there a bigger horse is really better, or should be more forgiving on the size of a horse? Because I always find people can most horses on size.
Right, well, I'll grab the lead here and start with this.
Say what you said.
Interesting thing. Schnitzel, extreme choice, not a single doubt. Northern Dancer, who was lucky to be 15 hands. Some of our greatest horses have been small. So I'm not as anti it as some other people are, but I understand the commercial pressures that if you want to send a horse to Hong Kong, it has to be a certain height and it has to be a certain weight. On the flip side of that, whenever I've had work experience students working with me at the races, and there'll be a 10-race card or whatever, and there's always an open company race. Now, these are people who have never been to the races, not that familiar with horses, and I'll bring them out and ask them, what can you tell me about this field of horses? Have a look at them walking around. You've been watching them all day. What can you tell me about this field? They're bigger. Invariably, the answer was they are bigger. Now, whether that's because they develop more after, or that were, had more musculature to them. I don't know. Maybe it was just that they were younger horses in the earlier races. But like the Olympians, they were just the better athletes, so they tended to develop so that they were bigger. But would small horse put me off? Absolutely not.
Good question, Jimmy. Not an easy one to answer. Horses are a very inexact science. No matter what way you turn, I'd say in Ireland, for example, they'd always say, a good, with the jumpers, a big horse is always better than a small horse because they've got a harder job to do. Here in Australia, people will always turn and say, well, look at Extreme Choice. He was 13 hands when he went through the yearling sales. But for every one Extreme Choice, there's 100 small horses that were no good, and for every big horse, there's 100 are no good. Because the reality is, most horses that go to the racetrack don't compete at an elite level. Most kids that start playing football, there's only 1 in 1,000 that'll make a AFL or NRL, irrelevant of their size. I would always, from a colt's perspective, err on the side of caution with size. Fillies not so much. They can never be too small if they're fast enough. But the reality is, if they're no good and they're small, well, every Tom, Dick, and Harry, she was too small, wasn't she? And the colts, you rarely hear them saying that they were too big. They weren't good enough. There's no way of really answering it. Do I critique horses more for being too small and too big? I actually think you see, if you're looking on each side of the scale, you see more horses that you would refer to as small than more horses that you refer to as being too big. And I think horses with a bit of time, if they're correct and if they've got bone, they've got action, I'm happy to wait with them. And I mean the stats that come out from Ozhorse every year outside of the 2-year-old, 90% of the prize money is for 3-year-olds and upwards. So that little bit of patience isn't going to help them. As long as you like it. If they're an athlete, big or small, I'm happy to give them a chance.
Question for you, Shane. In regards to surgery, would you prefer to buy a horse, like you say, a yearling, prefer to buy it that's had surgery done, or would you just completely can it? Let's say an OCD or
if they've had surgery?
Yeah.
I suppose it comes back to what, if I'm at a point where I'm asking the vet to evaluate the x-rays, I want to buy it, so I'm asking, is there a reason why I can't buy it? So if the surgery would preclude him from being a trade prospect, I don't mind if they say it needs time, and I mean, you've often said, give this 3 months, 6 months before you break it in, because no matter when you're buying a yearling, they're not racing for 12 months anyway, and most of them are not spring 2-year-olds. We have very few spring 2-year-olds anyway. So would an x-ray, provided the vets say the horse will be sound if we're buying it as a racehorse. Again, we're fortunate at the training complex at Cranbourne. I think it's a lot more forgiving than some other places. So that probably provides a little bit of opportunity as well. But no, I'd want to be pretty serious that the vet is saying you can't buy this for us to preclude it.
Thank you everyone for joining us for our seminar. We are going to announce the Lucky Door Prize winner. Thank you to our panel. We really appreciate your time and energy joining us this afternoon. And thank you to AgriFutures for their sponsorship and support of these seminars.